2019, the much-awaited Ayodhya case judgment had come, and years later, now there is the book launch of A Case for Ram, a very, very in-depth, insightful, and very, very intriguing look into how the lawyers for Ram prepared and fought the case. I'm being joined by Senior Advocate Sridhar Pottaraju and Advocate Anirudh Sharma, who are the authors of this book and members of the gigantic team for Ram Lala. First of all, thank you for speaking to India today. Today is the book launch. Today is now the third official book launch now in Delhi. My first question, of course, is the controversies around this judgment. The judgment was criticized. There is a lot of political questions that are asked even today about the judgment. With this book, how are you answering?
See, you need to also look at the people who are raising questions about this book, this judgment. The people who are wedded to ideology and diverse from truth are the people who are actually writing articles to criticize this judgment. I mean, I, as a student of commerce and a commercial lawyer, had an occasion to get into the book only because after seeing the evidence and the narrative being built after the judgment, it actually shook my conscience. I mean, how can someone be so diverse of truth and documents and record and testimonies on record in court on oath? So I think this intellectual dishonesty has been there for too long, and the only answer to dishonesty is truth. And therefore we bring through this book a documented evidence of everything what transpired was there in the court as a matter of evidence or history or probably every other aspect which one needs to note before they jump to a conclusion. So most of the conclusions that people are drawing to criticize are actually dishonest and bereft of any reference to the record which was there before the court.
I'll take the next question to you, Anirudh. In fact, today in the book launch, Professor K.K. Mohammed, who is the ASI expert, who's somebody who's also given his expert testimony in this case, talked about, and as Mr. Pottaraju just said, intellectual dishonesty, and he's in fact criticized what he calls communist historians for twisting the truth. This is something that Professor Mohammed has said, and this is also something that the Solicitor General of India, Tushar Mehta, has said. When you're talking about intellectual dishonesty, there are a lot of chapters in this book talking about the ASI's findings and how you had to go through them and interpret them. Can you tell us about that?
See, this was the first case in the world anywhere where evidence below the earth was dug up to decide a land dispute. As far as the intellectual dishonesty part is concerned, the Allahabad High Court had noted some, people using ASI to propagate wrong ideas, and also the fact that the historian's report was totally disbelieved by the Supreme Court, though the strong criticism leveled against the historian's report, the four historians' report, supposed to be the star historians, was totally disbelieved by the High Court, and High Court had made stringent comments. Though the comments were done away with, the Supreme Court also recorded that they did not at all read archaeological evidence. The Supreme Court also recorded the fact that they did not ever consult the report of Professor B.B. Wal, which was already available to them. So if something is available to you, why will you not consider them or go into them at all? An attempt was made to fit facts into ideology and not build an ideology on facts.
In the foreword of this book, senior advocate and former AG K.K. Venugopal has said, this is an amalgamation of religion, faith, history and legal principle. This is a new chapter in India's legal and social fabric. Given how controversial this entire case was, the 40 days constant, there was a constant look, everybody was looking at the court, everybody was listening to every single word, and the last 6 years of politics and criticism. How do you see your book in the context of this politics and criticism?
See, through this book, we actually try to bring out that India was not born on 15th August 1947. The idea of India and the civilizational heritage of this land has been there for a very long time. Contrary to what people try to define it in modern times because of their ideological moorings to deny our own civilizational culture or heritage. This case probably is one of those defining moments where this civilizational battle reached a court of law where truth had to be ascertained through cross-examination of witnesses, where they exposed their ideological moorings were more important to them than their professional integrity. And this is what Professor Mohammed also spoke today. So in this background, we try to bring out the truth as is. Whatever the evidence was, the fact that people of both faiths, mind you, on oath have said the existence of faith amongst the Hindus that this is the place of birth. And then there is a third angle, the elephant in the room, the Marxists, who actually are trying to manipulate the narrative. The witnesses from the Muslim side were honest. They said that yes, the Hindus believe that this is the place of birth, and the existence of place of birth being worshipped has been vouched by both witnesses of faith. It is the atheists who actually are trying to create a fissure in this narrative, so probably to keep themselves relevant.
Speaking of narratives and relevance, after this judgment, there have been multiple other petitions filed with regard to temple mosques disputes. Whether those are based on the faith-based arguments, whether they're based on property ownership arguments, whether they are based on the very much criticized Places of Worship Act. How do you see the influence of this case on all of these petitions?
See, you have to have a distinction between faith and evidence of faith. Faith may not be evidence, but practice of faith is evidence. So there was evidence of practice of faith right from those English travelers, the British travelers, the Christian missionaries, the French travelers passing through India. They all recorded the site being worshipped as Ram Janmabhoomi, as we have brought in the book as well as in the Supreme Court judgment. So, apart from that, what Mr. Muhammad said, the evidence, the glaring evidence, the naked eye evidence is present, and what archaeology can lead to is this case is an example for the world to follow. Not only for
My
India.
question is not about this case as an example for the world to follow. My question particularly is the politics of Mandir Masjid that came out after this judgment came, because now there are at least 18 or 19 Mandir Masjid cases across the country.
See, if those cases are there, then the judicial system is there to deal with it. Even if, those are politically motivated, they have to pass through the filter of evidence, as the Ram Janmabhoomi case has passed. It's not that you raise a political issue and it sails through. There's a filter of evidence which people have to present. Like in Janmabhoomi, we had evidence right from, this was the first case, where from before Christ, before BCE, from the first millennia BC to 1990s. We had evidence of the dead, evidence of the living, but evidence of the dead is always presented through recorded evidence. You cannot actually call them, it will be too dangerous.
In this book, you've quoted Senior Advocate K. Parasaran as saying, streets cannot be the forum for adjudication of a property dispute in a democracy. And as somebody who's lived through India's history, as somebody who's lived through India's partition, what is his view of this judgment and the aftermath with other matters?
Insofar as this judgment is concerned, I happened to accompany Parasaran sir from the airport. So out of curiosity, I did ask him, so what is your take? What are you expecting from the judgment on our way to from the airport to the Supreme Court to receive the judgment? He said that nobody will go empty-handed from my Ram. So that defines probably the Sanatana or the people who adhere to Sanatana, that we are not against anyone, we are inclusive. But that doesn't mean that we don't stand up for what is right. So it is in that spirit that you need to answer the other question that you raised.
For my final question, you've given a very poignant, very emotional narration of the way this entire case came about, the research that went into it, the long nights, the long days, and the health concerns of Mr. K. Parasaran. Can I also ask you about your experiences as well, since you were also part of all of it, maybe not the age factor worked in your favor, but other than that, how did it go?
See, it was all surreal. I mean, someone at 92 defying his glaucoma, defying high temperatures, virtually hiding behind 2 blankets, right? And then, still working, closing his eyes, asking people to read. So it was, a very surreal experience. It looked straight out from a soap opera. And our experience on that was, that there was some force aiding us. Right, as Mr. Parasan said, Ram wanted to come, that is why he is coming. I have done nothing, we have done nothing, and the lawyers have done the least.
Okay. What about you, sir? The long days, long nights, and huge amount of research. How did that impact you?
I think it was in fact a moment where we were relishing the learning that was happening parallelly apart from participating in the case. Learning in the sense of the dedication, discipline and hard work at 92 Parasaran sir, Vajanathan sir, Mr. Ranjit Kumar and Mr. Narsimha was putting in. That apart, for me personally, holding his hand from his car to the courtroom and back onwards, both of us, I felt there was a Maharshi who was performing a yajna spiritually, and I could feel that aura around him. In fact, I recall calling some of my juniors to come, please just take his blessings. I can experience that energy around him. So therefore, when he says that it was Ram and Parthasarathi who were actually driving him, that's probably what made me feel that here is a Maharshi performing a Rajasuya to ensure Ram comes back to where he belongs.
Thank you very much, both of you, for speaking to us. A case for Ram takes you through the entire gamut of years of research, days and months of working on the legal aspect of this case. It is a very, very intriguing look into the background. How do lawyers tackle a case, especially one that has such huge social, religious, legal, and political ramifications? In New Delhi, this is Anisha Mathur for India Today.